What's up, guys? We have another game. We are now above 700. We are rated 705. And we're playing against 700 Daphne Sage. We gotta be careful if they're a Sage. So we start with D4, a different opening this time. They respond with D5. Okay. You might have seen this before, the Queen's Gambit, C4. And if he takes, what that does is that relinquishes control of the E4 square. So it helps white create a nice center. Black doesn't take. Black instead brings the knight out. The knight defends the pawn. The downside of this move is that a pawn doesn't defend the pawn. So if I take and he takes with a piece, now I can go e4 hitting that piece. Whereas if that was a pawn, he would just take it with his pawn. So I'm going to take, and that's going to lure a piece onto the square, which it does. This is going to allow me to attack and open up both of my bishops and get ready for maximum fast development. Even if I lose a pawn here, I wouldn't care because I just want to develop quickly and apply pressure. So he retreats. What does this threaten? It threatens to win the pawn. What's the drawback? It wastes a little bit of time. So now I'm going to develop my knight while defending his threat. He develops his bishop. What's the threat? Well, he's aiming at the queen. What's the drawback? Well, moving the bishop immediately undefends the b7 pawn. Also, it doesn't get him closer to castling. So, probably not the most accurate move. You can throw a knight here. You can throw a bishop here. Or you can take advantage of one of the drawbacks of his move, which is that it undefends this. You can move your queen away from the threat and counter threat his drawback. The downside of that is this pawn is hanging, so you have to do a little bit of calculation. For the lazy folks like me, we can just go f3. It's a very ugly move, and I don't recommend you play it. Really, you should probably just bring your bishop out or something. It's normal. But this move, he never moved the e-pawn, which means you never have to worry about the queen coming to this diagonal early, or his bishop, because nothing's developed. Also, this comes with tempo, and now where's he gonna put it, right? And now I'm getting free moves. I have nice development. He goes this way, so he's staring into pawns into pawns. So I'm now going to continue developing one of my pieces. Which piece should I develop? Well, I do want to move my queen out at some point. I also want to defend the d4 pawn a little more. So it seems kind of natural for me to develop this bishop, add a little support. You could go to a more active square like f4, but I'm just trying to show a nice solid setup. No opening theory. Just create a stable center. Right now I have two pawns. It's defended pretty well. And also you always have to watch out for like knight takes tactics because the queen is eyed. So he moves his pawn, developing his dark square bishop. Okay, that makes sense. Now it's my turn. I think now is the time to develop our queen where we wanted and apply pressure, because this square is going to be very annoying to defend. I mean, queen c8 or b6, they're both very ugly. And yeah, I mean, now that if he goes queen c8, you'll wish you had your bishop on f4 so you can have like these Jobava London ideas. Although you can put a rook there and then coordinate that way. And your center's always safe, so. Either way, those are nuances. That's not, I mean, something that's going to make or break your game. You're going to have much bigger problems than the decision between these two squares. He goes g5, or she goes. And what does this threaten? Nothing. What are the drawbacks? Well, the drawbacks are it's a waste of a move, not developing a piece, not castling, hanging a pawn with a crazy pin because now your knight's undefended. Also doesn't address this threat. So just like a horrible, horrible move. So I could take this pawn. I could take this pawn. I'm going to go bring my queen in and ruin all of his light squares, because that allows me to have ideas with this bishop now. Also, his rook is hanging, so that's something. The only way to defend the rook is to move this knight to connect the queen. If you move the knight here, it hangs. If you move it here, it hangs. So you have to move it here. But then I have other tactics probably. He ignores his rook hanging. He pushes to g4, she. So what's this threaten? Nothing. Because if they take the pawn, I could recapture in many ways. What's the downside of this move? Again, waste of time, no development, no castling, not addressing the threats in the position. Doesn't make sense, right? Okay, glad we agree on that. I'm going to take this rook because it's a rook. And now we're completely winning. Black has no counterplay. And you'll notice plenty of pieces on the back rank. The pieces that are developed, this bishop, completely garbage, right? It needs to be here or here. This knight, which is developed, it's actually completely stifled, and it's not supported by a pawn, so it's super loose, especially to this. So black is just has nothing going for him. He develops this knight and opens up this queen. Maybe he's hoping I take this knight and blunder my queen, although material would then be even, so that's pretty funny. Okay, I could take the queen, right? It's the most forcing. He has to take back, and then I win the knight. That's an option. We could give this check. He can move his king. I mean, there's no reason to do anything crazy. Let's just trade the queens. Now there's no queens on the board. He has to take back, and we've got another piece. We're up 9 points of material. Again, just from developing, all we did was develop. And then before you know it, free rook. And you may say, oh, well, you did queen b3, attacking this pawn. But yes, if you're following, I made that because I'm keeping mental notes of the drawbacks of his move. Oh, that pawn's undefended, right? So it leads you to candidate moves in your mind. So now black takes the pawn. What does this threaten? Well, I suppose it threatens to take this pawn and win the rook. Okay. So there's no need to allow that unless we have some type of forced checkmate or something, which we don't. So we're just going to develop a piece because developing is always the right answer. And we're going to remove that threat from the board. And although we haven't castled, you can see that black couldn't possibly ever come up with an idea to come near our king. So it doesn't matter. Of course we still probably will. In cases like this, when you're ahead development or when you're obviously winning, you always want to try to castle queenside if possible, because it will make your attack even stronger. It's an even more aggressive move than short castling. It immediately puts a rook on a central file, and so it's just a stronger move in lots of situations. So he moves his bishop. What does this threaten? Well, it threatens to take the pawn because it's hit twice and defended once. What are the drawbacks of this move? Well, he's moving a piece that's already developed and not touching the pieces back at home. Not good. What are we gonna do? Well, you could defend the pawn, but that takes time. You could push the pawn, but that gives him squares for his knight. You could not do anything with the pawn, and that's what I want to do. I'm going to push d5 because his king is still in the center. It actually can't go to the side because of my bishop, which is super annoying for him. And if he tries to take this pawn, I mean, he will take it. But I'm going to open up the center. I'm going to long castle. And who cares about pawns? I would rather all of my pawns be taken off the board. He can have not just that one, but he can have all 6 of my pawns. I don't want them. I'd rather have my rooks beaming, right? I'd move this, take this, check. I'd rather have everything be beaming. Now he develops his bishop, pins the knight, and prepares to finally get his rook out. But is it too late? What does this threaten? Well, nothing, because the knight's defended, so it's not a threat. And the drawbacks, well, it's a pretty good move, but it's way too late, and he's down 9 points of material. So you could take the pawn, you could long castle, you could short castle, you could jump your knight in here because you have this threat, and if he takes your pawn, you have this threat. There's so many moves, it's ridiculous. I'm just gonna long castle because I really want my rook to be staring on the d file. All the moves are winning. I'm not choosing the the top engine line. I'm choosing the like a reasonable human option that makes sense to people when they watch this as well. So for example, we can jump in with this check and pick up the bishop, releasing pressure on us. We can take with check and open up the position. There's options. What does this move do? Absolutely nothing. He should have moved it away from the rook file. I don't know why he's moving it closer into checks. Into 3 different checks. It makes no sense. But I'm not going to argue. I'm just going to take. Just to open up my rook. I don't feel like calculating. I just know that I'm opening my rook. He's taking. His king is coming even closer to my army. And so that's the drawback of this move. His king also doesn't have like too many places to go. He always has dark squares if you try to like checkmate him. So in light of that, I'm gonna see if we can try to get him to go here so we can take the dark squares. But instead of responding to my threat, he counter threats. But I'm up 10 points of material, so trading like this is bad for him. So I'm just gonna take and let him take. And then I'm gonna move my rook. Now, I don't care about this pawn, right? I want to get as active as possible. So what's the most active available square? Let's see. Out of these, I don't want to put it on a light square, so we're going to choose between the dark squares. I'm just going to pick this one. He can take this if he wants. It's a big waste of time, so I don't mind seeing that. And he does take the pawn as expected. We just want to increase our activity. We don't care. So we're just going to bring our last piece into the game. We're going to double stack so we have more options. And he might go back and attack our rook, but we can just go here and force him to leave. And okay, so he moves his bishop and pins our knight to our rook. What's the threat? taking the knight. Drawback, I don't see any. We can just move our rook. We can attack the knight in response. We can defend our knight. Um, but I think the simplest is to defend. We also have the option of throwing in a check, but you have to make sure he can't double attack two of your pieces because that's not going to end up well. I think this is the simplest response, just defending, getting it out of the way, and staying double stacked. And now we have lots of pieces that are going to be coming in for checks and stuff. So something's going to, break for him. We're just keeping our pieces on good squares, not even calculating really. And his king's in the center. If you don't blunder anything big, it shouldn't be bad. He moves his rook to an open file and defends his knight. It makes a lot of sense. Probably a little too late though. But what are you going to do? I'm going to jump my knight in, which threatens some various checks and taking the pawn, and just creating a different mating net, because this knight, this pawn doesn't need defense. These squares don't matter, so we're moving it forward into the opponent's territory. But now he moves it here, blundering his knight immediately. It hits the rook, but I can just take with check, and that's a whole nother piece. And this is kind of funny, 2 rooks and 2 knights. I've never really seen this. But you can see the domination. And now this piece is hanging with check. This square is cut off. I'm just going to bring it back. I have 50 seconds. Let me just lift my rook up. There's a Arabian mate, which involves the knight and the rook. So I'm noticing that. That's why I lifted my rooks, because if I can get it here, well, that's not even checkmate, so you can just ignore me. I go here, he goes here. That's annoying. Can you believe this, guys? We're gonna do it anyway, because I have 30 seconds, so making a move is better than not making a move. And I'm gonna go check and just trade his rooks, because I don't feel like hanging stuff. So I force a rook trade. I was so busy talking about Arabian's mate, I forgot to calculate it. And now we have checkmate here. So that was an interesting game. We're seeing the same mistakes again and again. We're seeing the same principles being broken. I feel like once we get to maybe 900, we're going to start seeing more principled play. So right now we're still at, he's 784, we're 720. Okay. So not there yet, but we're getting there. Hopefully this really drills everything into your brain. So he opens up with 1e4, and we play caro-kann. These are the first 2 moves. I'm going to take in the center. They recapture. The main move is bishop f4, but I'm going to go with knight f6, a normal developing move, king size knight, preparing castling, and he takes. Now you could take in either direction. Taking with the e-pawn is a more solid way to play. Taking with the g-pawn is a more risky way to play. It's called the Bronstein-Larsen variation, as opposed to the Tartakower. So we're going to go with the more risky way. He develops his knight to f3. Standard move, prepares castling, fine. I'm going to use this opportunity to develop a piece, a minor piece, right? We want to develop a minor piece. This blocks the bishop. This one's not open yet. We don't want to go here yet. However, we do want to get it out of the way so we can put our knight here. It creates a nice pin, and fine. In this structure, because we ruined our pawn structure with this risky business, I'm going to castle queenside. So I want to evacuate my queenside pieces fast. And so by moving my knight first, I would be blocking my bishop. If I move my bishop first and then my knight here, I can castle faster. So now he goes here, which controls this diagonal, which is a nice diagonal. What is the drawback? Well, again, it undefends this pawn on b2, which can be annoying should I choose to do something like queen b6, right? Because it hits the pawn and it becomes kind of awkward to defend. So I'm going to throw that in just to see how they respond. I'm going to develop the queen a little early because it comes with a threat, because he made a weakness early. And it's not, he doesn't have a convenient way to respond. b3, I mean, it's possible, but looks weird. Queen or rook defending a pawn always looks weird. And this helps prepare queenside castling. It's not necessary. You could probably go e6 and bishop d6 and just challenge everything. But whatever. He goes h3, attacking our bishop. We could just trade. And when he takes with the queen, he's hanging this pawn as well as this pawn. And if he takes with the pawn, his pawn structure is so ugly with doubled isolated pawns. So I'm going to take this piece, and however he takes back is bad for him. He takes back with the pawn because he doesn't want to undefend this guy. You could take this pawn. You have to expect something like rook over. And then you have things like check, and it could get a little dicey because you have nothing else developed as black. So while I'm sure you could take the pawn, I'm not going to. I'm going to just develop. That seems a little reasonable. Maybe I should take the pawn. But then if he goes over, even if you take this pawn, he could take here. That's really ugly. So that's a bad habit. Let's just develop a minor piece. Let's develop our very clumsy, very slow knights. And we want to get this bishop out. We want a castle. We want to move our rook to g8. Just so that all of our pieces are active. He moves his queen, maybe preparing a long castle of his own, and defending his bishop. But now if I take this pawn, he can't swing a rook over because his rook doesn't protect it. So he'll have to defend his rook by moving it here or here, which means I don't have to move my queen. So it looks like more enticing to take it for sure. I could long castle myself, which also looks very nice. What would be a good response for him if I take this? His rook is hanging. Maybe he brings it all the way. And what if in that position a long castle? I mean, what does he really have there? If he tries something like queen here, threatening a checkmate, I can always just bring my queen back or my knight. I'm going to take this pawn with a threat. I'm slightly undeveloped, but once again, it comes with a threat. It's not like I can take this and then he gets free reign to do what he wants, because he has to move his rook, just a useless move. He could go back with the queen, but he just moved it, so I don't mind that. And after e6 or e5, I may have some ideas. Something like this. But let's see what Integrex does. Their rook is hanging. I have to address it. They can't check me. Okay, so they move it over here, protecting this pawn. Now there is another pawn hanging, but that's very greedy. And I am not trying to be greedy. I just want to go e6 so I can develop, have some dark square control, right? So I could castle long, but I feel like I do have one more turn to use it for develop instead of castling. I think I have the time for this. I don't see any immediate threats for white. Also, it helps control this square one more time, so there's no, breaking open the file since my king's in the center. But it's really to look at stuff like this. Bishop b4 forces c3. I can then get a queen trade if I want for free. I'm up a pawn already. So that's something. If he goes c4 right now, he loses his queen because he can't take because it's pinned. And yeah, this knight is not the best. It needs to be rerouted somehow. And so white moves the queen again. What does this threaten? Doesn't threaten anything because this I just take. What's the drawback? Well, he's moving his queen 1,000 times. It's not developing. It just lets me castle and do whatever I want for free, without any pressure or problems. Now, maybe he thought he was getting out of the way of this. Okay, fine. Now if I do it, check, he can move his king, or if he does this, it's not the same. It's not as strong. So I'm going to remain flexible and long castle. I know this controls this, but he doesn't have any knights. Light square bishop can't do anything. So only the queen can coordinate, and I'm keeping it under wraps. Also, I have a dark square bishop. It's not going to be a problem. Also, he's tied down. He has his own problems to deal with on the dark squares, so he can't really do anything to me. And now it's hard for him to come up with a plan because he doesn't have one. I would say the best you can do is develop, right? Maybe his best move is this. I don't know. Some type of developing move. And then hide his king on f1. I don't really know. His king is just not going to be safe. I don't see a good place to put it. And so as black, I'm almost fully developed. And even though I haven't moved my bishop, it controls lots of squares. It has lots of options. I can't click for the life of me. And so I'll move it just when the time is right. She might do this, just defending the pawn, but it's actually not defended because it hit twice, so sneak attack. I can also put my bishop, okay, never mind. So white goes here. What does this threaten? Well, a queen trade. There's nothing happening here. Of course, I'm up a pawn. I could take this pawn. However, he could do something like this, threatening checkmate in 1. If you take the bishop, you lose checkmate on 1. I could take this if he goes here. I could just do something simple like moving my knight. That's fine too. But he doesn't have to. If you take this, he can do something like hitting you this way, a different tempo move. And then you might walk into some trouble. So I'm just going to do the simple thing. Queen trade. I'm up a pawn. But now his rook is staring down. You got to be careful with weird sacrifices. Um, this guy's trying a Bowden's mate, which leads me to believe that he's not playing his own game. What? But I'm not going to allow that, obviously. I'm going to go here. So that way if he takes and goes here, it's not checkmate. I can't, but that's so easy to walk into. What a crazy checkmate. But now that I defended against that, I am going to develop with tempo, check. Connect my rooks, and now his king has no good square. It either blocks the bishop or lines up with my rook. So he lines up with my rook, which I'm just going to automatically take with check because it's a central pawn. I get to double for free. This comes with check. I'm just stunned about almost falling for Bowden's mate. That's crazy. So he gets his king out of the way. I'm just going to bring my other rook in. I'm not going to calculate. I'm just going to check him. He's going to go down. I'm going to check him. He's going to go down. I'm going to move some stuff, and he should walk into a mate, right? If his king walks into my army, there should be a mate. So, whoa. At first, I was like, he's doing it voluntarily, but he's trying to get his bishop out, so I get it. So now the check square is covered, but it actually walks into this check. Oh my god, I just hung my rook. Okay. We're gonna make believe that didn't happen. Now we're down a lot of we're down quite a bit of material. So check here. I really want to mate at this point because I'm down stuff. Check. And if he sacks, there's also this check which can he can't sack. Well, he can sack the rook. Here. I'm not really seeing the mate though. I kind of feel like there should be though, as long as I don't move the knight on this turn. Let's go with e5. I feel like e5 or c5 might lure his king into an awkward square. Although I guess he could go here, I didn't really consider that. Okay, he doesn't do it. I haven't discovered checks, but they don't win much. This is a double discovery. Also doesn't win much. And after this, what am I even doing? Debatable. I'm just gonna go here to cover this escape square. Maybe he'll go here. Oh, I butchered this. Okay, so he goes here, attacking the bishop, but now that's checkmate. And luckily, even after I blundered a rook, yikes, she walks into checkmate. I don't even think she definitely had a stronger defense against my checkmate right here, because I definitely messed up. But this isn't it. You don't want to walk your king forward. So now this move, check, defends everything. And that would be checkmate. So we're just going to do that. We gained some points. We almost lost that. And we're now rated 720. We're just going to keep climbing. Try to get to 800. Alright, see you guys in the next episode.